Welcome back to the Prepare Like a Pro podcast. This week on the show we have Alex McVeigh, a physio at the Adelaide Crows Football Club, the AFLW side. Alex is also a sport and exercise physiotherapist from Adelaide. He holds a Master's in Advanced Clinic Physiotherapy in sports, where he got that from the University of South Australia. He's worked at the Adelaide Crows as a physiotherapist for the past 3 years across the development space, SANFL and AFL programs. He also consults clinically with a particular focus on injuries of the lumbo-pelvic-hip complex and lower limb area, as well as being involved in research projects at the University of South Australia. Before we start episode 45, the Prepare Like a Pro podcast mission is to empower athletes and staff with practical knowledge from some of the industry's most inspiring individuals and to strengthen the AFL community. If you like the show, please show your support by following us on Instagram and to subscribe to our podcast. We're on YouTube, iTunes and Spotify. Thanks for joining us, guys. Like every week, feel free to send questions through by hitting the bottom of your screen, that question button, and we'll get to your question later on in about 15 minutes or so. I'm just going to invite Alex to join us now. Bear with me.
Here he is. How you going?
Hey, Jack. How you doing?
Yeah, going well, mate. Thanks for jumping on.
No, my pleasure.
First live chat, or you've done this before?
No, mate, this is the first, so it's all brand new for me.
Fantastic. Awesome, mate. Glad to give you your debut. We'll dive straight in, mate. Take us back to the beginning. When did you recognise you had a passion for physiotherapy?
I was always like I think like a lot of physios that do sport, I guess. I was always like a sporty kid, and I played all the heaps of different sports when I was growing up. So I was doing basketball and table tennis, and I did athletics, and soccer was probably my main one. So probably when I was 14, 15, I was really enjoying sports and absolutely loving that. And then when I got to year 11, originally I wanted to be an engineer because my dad's an engineer. Yeah. But I went and did year 11 special maths and just thought, no way am I doing this for a career. And at the same time I did that, I actually, my brother was doing like a vet course in fitness. And so I joined him just to kind of get out of school. And then just learning about the body and everything, I just loved it. So found it really easy to learn just because it was really fun and could kind of use some of the stuff I was learning to help me in my sport. And then, stop the back of that. Thought, okay, what can I do that's a career that's learning about the body and all this cool stuff that I've just learned? And then physio is kind of the next option.
All right, fantastic. So, you're sporty kid, active. Did you have any significant injuries that you had to rehab or anything like that, and that got you down the medical side? Or
the first time I think I did a good one was when I was 16. I did an ankle sprain. That was my first injury, and the club I was playing for, we had a physio that kind of showed me the ropes and how to rehab, and that was kind of my first exposure, and that was fun. It was cool to learn, cool to see how quickly you could heal with a few exercises and be back out there soon enough.
And is that where you think you first, the penny dropped, that was something you were interested in doing because you saw that physio and what they did with your ankle?
100%. Before that, I didn't even know what physio was. I didn't even know it was a thing. So having that exposure to then as a kid kind of opened my eyes and said, oh, that's a pretty cool career. That's something I actually wouldn't mind doing.
Fantastic. And then when you finished high school, what was your path like there? Did you go straight into uni?
Yeah, I was kind of lucky. Probably. So I managed to get some okay marks and I was able to go straight from school into uni and started my Bachelor of Physio at the Uni of SA. Mm-hmm. And just did the 4 years there, and then once that was finished, started working in private practice and started doing some stuff with some soccer clubs here in Adelaide.
Right, okay. And then you were doing your hours there. Were you at the soccer club through your master's degree, or was that just part of your own doing?
Yeah, I started when I was doing my my undergrad. I was working as a sports trainer for a local kind of amateur team. And I was the only guy out helping. So it was a lot of taping. When you're a student, they think, oh, you're qualified. So they'd ask me for advice on injuries, and I really had no idea what I was doing, but have a crack. And it was like an awesome way to learn and start to see stuff that you wouldn't necessarily get in your undergrad. A lot of your physio stuff there's sports is one side of it and your musculoskeletal, but you've also learned in neuro and hospital and this other stuff.
Yeah.
So I did that as I was learning. And then once I graduated, I went and actually got a job for like a local soccer team here in the National Premier League. And I was like their physio for a year, kind of looking a bit more over like the program, but not a whole bunch. Mainly just doing the same thing, just seeing lots of injuries and helping them get them ready for the weekend. But it was a really good kind of place to start because you get the experience of seeing lots of acute injuries and other stuff that in private practice I wasn't seeing a lot of.
Yeah, okay. So you're getting that repetition of injuries and how to rehab them and diagnose, and I imagine like any skill set you need a volume to bank up your experience.
100%. And make mistakes as well. Like a lot of it, I reckon if I look back now, I think, oh, geez, man, you definitely do it differently, but I learn a lot from it. It was great.
Fantastic. And so soccer makes sense for you playing soccer yourself. You understand the game, you understand the nuances of the sport. How did you then go from soccer to football? How did that come about? Was that through a connection you knew? Was that through uni?
Yeah, so when I worked for a couple of years in private practice, and I got to a point where I felt like I just wanted to, I'd almost like hit a bit of a ceiling, and I just wanted to learn a bit more. Mm-hmm. So I went and started a master's in sports physio. And at the same time I did that, I got a job at a good clinic here in Adelaide that Steve Saunders works for. So he happened to be the head of high performance at North Melbourne at the time. Yep. And then, when I was doing that, I got another job for another club, and I was, I guess, a bit more of a head of performance type of role as well as the physio. So I was doing all the session RPE stuff, tracking loads, doing the recovery, doing the rehab, kind of getting a bit of, crunching, making big spreadsheets in Excel and crunching.
A bit of a sports science.
Yeah, almost like a bit of a sports science type of side to it as well. And then,
nice.
Yeah, so something off the back of that must have impressed Steve, because then when he's gone and got a job at Adelaide, he's asked me to come with him and help him out. When he started there, so that was in 2018.
Fantastic. And what was your role with him at the Adelaide Crows then?
Yeah, so I was a physio. So my main responsibilities were to look after the coming for treatment on the main training days for the boys. And particularly I was probably more in charge of looking at the first 3-year players. Yep. But still doing some work with some of the senior guys, whatever kind of came up. And then I was in charge of the SANFL development squad program and the rehab for that group. And then also a lot of our some of our monitoring systems and stuff like that we just implemented. I had a kind of responsibility to look after some of the screening data and kind of present that back to the team and crunch numbers there.
Awesome. So where did the skill set of the sports science sort of load monitoring come in? Is that through your own passion and learning through your experiences as you go? Or was that part of the degree in the master's program?
We didn't really get any of that in the master's. The master's was a lot of more kind of clinical reasoning and your hands-on skills. But a lot of it was just kind of initially was just through listening to podcasts and just an interest in tracking that kind of stuff. And at the time, there was lots of research coming out about acute to chronic workloads, and that was kind of the real buzz thing. And then, I just managed to stumble across a couple of good YouTube pages, really, and they had some good videos and tutorials on how to build a spreadsheet, build a database. I kind of took that and kind of just tweak it a little bit and make it my own.
Awesome.
With the team, yeah.
And was that a full-time role where you're working with the senior boys and then also SANFL Club as well?
No, it was part-time. So I was there, so it would have been about kind of 25 hours a week. So I was doing that, coming in mainly for half days, and then for the SANFL, like we've got like a top up kind of squad. That would be in a night. So I'd do say afternoon and a night with the Crows, and then I'd be working in the clinic seeing patients as well.
Yeah, right. Big weeks.
Mate, they were huge. You know, you end up looking at the back of the season and you go like, all right, I need a off season as much as the boys do, you know. But it was good fun. Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. And then have you had along your way, along this sort of journey, have you had strong influences? You mentioned Steve Saunders. I mentioned he's had an impact on your career. Are there other people that have sort of mentored you or helped you along the way?
Yeah, like heaps and heaps. So like during my masters, we had some of the teachers I had. So one of the guys, Mark Jones, was a big mentor. He's I guess probably best known for some of the clinical reasoning and getting your thought processes right, and trying to understand the different kind of all different elements that can come into someone's presentation. So he was a big mentor. A club doctor.
In terms of diagnosis, is that what you mean? With the
diagnosis. Yeah, diagnosis and getting just getting a good snapshot of the person that you're in front of and all the contributing factors that they can present with, and then how that then influences your treatment and your rehab and all that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then the club doctors have been great as well. So I'm a head doctor here, Mark Zazana, has been a really good mentor. He's taught me lots of cool stuff and images and the kind of the quirky things that come up, and then some of the other things that the docs are great at, like when to get scanned, when to get an injection, those type of things have been really good.
Sure. Awesome. Okay. And then, so that was your role for a couple of years at Adelaide before going into AFLW?
Yeah. So I did it for 2 years. And then once COVID happened last year, I was one of the many that got kind of made redundant as the budget cuts kind of came in. And then then shortly after that, the club approached me and said, would you like to take the AFLW program and look after that instead? So I said, yep, sure thing. So I started doing that, like working with all the girls in the off season, which would have been around about this time last year, until just recently.
Fantastic. And what differences have you noticed working with female footballers compared to men in the demands of the game?
Yeah, probably the first thing is that they're all part-time. So the women's game is still building, so they don't have the budgets and the resources just yet to be full-time athletes like the men are. But the expectation is almost that they are. Like we still give them lots of training to do, and they're expected to kind of do stuff outside of the club and do additional, upper body training or cross training or something like that. So that's probably one of the tricky things is trying to balance that demand, but then they've also got work lives. We have girls that some of them are shift workers, so they'll train with us in the night time and then go straight and do a 10-hour shift at the hospital, and then finish their day doesn't finish till 10 o'clock the next morning. Or other girls that start work at 4 a.m. So we're just learning to be flexible, and recovery is not super important. Getting in the ice bath for them, it's just go home, have as much sleep as you can, and have a good feed, and don't stress too much. Just about the little things.
Yeah, which is really important, isn't it? Focusing on your big rocks, so to speak, rather than just getting caught up with all the little things. I imagine even more important when you've got more demands outside of the game and your training schedule, you're putting energy into what's really important. Is that a constant battle with who gets time with the athletes?
100%. Like it's tricky. There's I suppose there's kind of the optimal what we'd like to do if we had all the time in the world. And even that can be with the S&C coaches and the guys pre-training, because some of the girls will come straight from their full-time job. They've maybe got 30 minutes to get from work finishing to the club to us on the oval, and in 15 minutes when they get there. So we don't have that opportunity to get a little dose of training in there. So it's just trying to bring it back to what's the big things that matter, and then how can we squeeze it in around your schedule? So that might be if those people, sometimes they can do a little bit extra in the preseason on Saturday morning, or if they're happy to do something on Tuesday morning, non-supervised if they're up to it. And just kind of getting creative, sometimes we sneak it in some of their gym programs, if there's a bit of neck strength, we'll get them to do, we had a few girls they were having some, like a lot of like headaches coming from the neck and having some neck issues. So we'd, squeeze in some neck strengthening by doing, ring rows where they're kind of in a craniocervical flexion position, and try and just like sneak it in a bit so they doesn't have to be a separate thing.
Yeah, you're not adding in more reps, you're just doing things with slightly differently.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. That's awesome. And what's your role there? Are you head physio in the program, or?
Yeah, so we're in the AFLW program, we just got the one physio. So I guess I'm head physio. I don't tend to call myself the head physio, but I'm the physio for the team.
Yeah.
And then we've got a strength coach, a sports scientist. So there's probably the three of us as the main high performance department, and then a club doctor kind of supports us, and a podiatrist and nutritionist around that as well.
Yeah. And are you working closely with a sports scientist? Because I know that you mentioned that's an area that you're passionate about, the load monitoring side of things. Is that something you're still involved in?
Yeah, not so much at the moment. Like, still kind of checking numbers and chasing numbers and that kind of thing, and just keep an eye on it. But our sports science Grace is really good. She's all over that, so she doesn't need me kind of peering over her shoulder. We've got a lot of work to do. But for me, it's more now would be just using that data to plan rehab and plan loads and make sure the speed progressions are that we plan for are actually delivered, and keep it up to date with that. Yeah. And then I work really close with the S&C coach, Josh. Me and him are always talking together, and I think a good high performance department, your physios and your S&C coaches should be best mates.
Absolutely.
It's not really independent. I think there's a continuum there that your injury prevention and performance is really the same thing. It's
moving well and understanding load management, preventing injuries, and you're going to feel pretty fresh and fit going into a game, aren't you?
Yeah, 100%.
What about for developing footballers? You've done it at the SANFL level. You've done it with the first and second year boys at AFL level, as well as seen now with the girls. So you sort of had a good exposure to all different types of footballers that are developing. Are there key focuses for those listening to this podcast that you think are really important from a physical point of view?
I think from a physical point of view, it's probably the mistakes I guess I see is chasing the shiny stuff too soon. So everyone wants to be faster, everyone wants to be more powerful, but you need to build the base first. So some of the stuff I see with guys is that the strength endurance, the muscle size, the kind of the work capacity stuff is missing, and there's a push too soon to go into really heavy, really lots of triple extension focused movements. With maybe an over focus on that is probably something I tend to see as well. Whereas to build a really robust footy player, which would be the kind of the goal in the first few years, you have to consider, strengthening your body in the sagittal plane. So going sideways and doing movements, in rotation, and also getting, strength like anteriorly through your hip flexors and your groins, and having, as much of a focus on those areas as it is getting strong glutes and quads and hamstrings.
Gotcha. And what would be an example of some movements that you think people are potentially doing too much of that are shiny, and that you'd like to see more of, you reckon?
Oh, I think there's just tends to be a lot of triple extension is the only movement in a program. It's probably the main thing. So you see classically, you might see a guy do trap bar deadlift, which is it's a really good exercise. I like it, but trap bar deadlift, a sled push, a box jump, something like that, say, and that's the program where where maybe a more rounded program was going to have some calf strengthening, that maybe that you're going to do like a lateral sled pull to develop some strength through the abductors in the sagittal plane, some isolated hip flexor work. So you've got some really good strength and capacity anteriorly, that kind of stuff. So just mixing it up so it's not all just the one movement all the time.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. And like you said, it's not always the fancy sort of shiny stuff, but doing your basics really well is so important. And the earlier you start, the better you're going to be down the track, aren't you?
100%. And I think that's the thing, seeing the really good pros do well, is that they get the basics done really well and they enjoy the process as well. You know, sometimes it can be a bit of a grind when you've got, an exercise that's maybe not super, it's a bit more boring, it's a bit more monotonous. But there's a point to it. And if you can kind of see or get enjoyment in the process of doing it, because, you know, the long-term outcome is going to be good. They seem to be the thing that the really good pros tend to do, or the habits that they get into.
Fantastic. That actually sort of flows on to the next question, into not just individuals, but teams, successful teams as well, both soccer, football, successful teams that you've seen. Is there a common mindset or culture that you've noticed?
I think
as
definitely
well as individuals.
Yeah, I think with teams the group as a collective buys into the same goal. Everyone's kind of going the same way, and that they're enjoying the process of doing it. Like, but maybe not always enjoying it, because sometimes it's tough. Sometimes, you know, if you're in the middle of pre-season and you're doing your conditioning blocks, they're not particularly fun. But everybody does it together and bands together. There's that kind of part of culture. And there's also the good teams, I think, as well, have a really good, healthy sense of competition where guys are trying to beat the other guys so they both get better. That's probably been the characteristics I've seen a bit. And then with the really good players, they just have supreme confidence. So if they don't, if they make a couple mistakes, kick a couple bad ones, their ability to not let it get to them, not let it get into their head, and just have confidence that they'll be able to execute their skills the next time they get it, seems to be what kind of separates them from some other players who maybe aren't as great.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, mate. That's some clear, really important sort of, like we were talking about before, the basics of performance, working together as a collective. Like for team sports, that's got to be at the top of the tree for the most important thing. If everyone's doing their own thing and own agenda, probably not going to work as a unit very well. And then, especially with long competitive pre-seasons, like you mentioned, it can be quite healthy to have that competition, can't it, internally for that period, because that is your competition for quite a while. You're not going to play a team for a period of time, so
100%,
competition.
Yeah, that's it, and it pushes people. I think, you know, a bit of pressure and competition, and, you know, if me and you're working together, you're working just as hard as I am, and I've got to bring my A game to training. Is only good for the team, you know.
We've had a question sent through from one of the people watching, Lucas. This is a tricky one. Ways to heal a hamstring faster. He might be managing a sore hammy by the sense of it, Lucas.
Yeah. Well, first I'd say get some help from some professionals so they can guide you. I think with rehab, it's got to come down to knowing your kind of goals for each stage that you're in. So if you're in the early stages, knowing when to start your strengthening work, when you can start to kind of run fast, that type of thing. But I was giving some practical stuff. I'd just say start loading. If you can start, as long as it's not a tendon that's involved, you can generally go to some longer muscle lengths early, try and strengthen there, and then make sure you've got sufficient strength before you really go fast.
Awesome, mate. Thank you. I'm sure that's a massive help. And is there things that you've seen over your time, like whether it be hamstring strains or groin injuries, whatever it might be, that you've seen a lot of change in the way things are dealt with in terms of management?
I think hamstrings definitely. I think we're a lot more aggressive and confident to be aggressive now. But also knowing when to not be. So I think some of the research that's come out with intramuscular tendon injuries and the difference of them, say like a normal musculotendinous junction, that's been a big game changer. So knowing that you can push, as long as the tendon's not there, you can go a lot more aggressive and try and get longer early and do some of that eccentric work early. That's been good at getting people back early, but also getting them back and having less of an injury risk. Groins a bit the same as well. I think we've probably got a better understanding of the biomechanics around the groin and how to push groins on a bit, and not as much. When I first started, there's probably a little bit of fear with groin injuries and the old osteitis pubis that you need rest and some of those passive things being the main treatment standards, whereas now strengthening and getting like the appropriate control around your hip is much more of a focus.
Fantastic. And that's something that you've like as Steve Saunders sort of helped you along your way, or that's something you've just progressed through your research and applying and application?
Oh, 100% with Steve. It's as well as reading stuff. But one of the really cool things when I started working with Steve is that we'd get footy players from other clubs that come and see him for a second opinion, or they'd come from NRL or basketball. With normally it's a population where they're not the normal groin. They because there's good people at clubs that are doing really good work, and just the standard stuff hasn't helped. So being able to sit in with him and have a look at delving a bit deeper and checking some other kind of loading ways to load and focus on slightly different areas to be able to improve strength and see how quickly that can come back sometimes has been a really, really cool way to learn.
Yeah, fantastic. Especially complex cases that you said that aren't traditional, like they're not presenting as classic cases. And like you said, there's experts in there that have tried all maybe the research or the basic things that normally do work and they don't. And being able to see how an expert pivots and does things differently in that moment, that must be massive in your development.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. And then taking like the cool thing when I started working with Steve there is I was working with the soccer club as well, so I'd learn some of those things and then be able to apply it myself and give it a crack and see some nice results. Treating in that way as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned the connection of physios and S&Cs. I mean, that's something I've certainly noticed from the S&C side of things that is so great about footy clubs is that we do work as a unit, and you each are learning off each other, which is a great thing. It's really good for the athlete as well because you're getting a lot more of the whole picture. Do you find that in the private sector it's different when you're working with clinics, when you haven't got an S&C there and you're having to take on some of that, or you might be communicating with someone that you're not actually working with? Is it harder or is it still?
Yeah, it's definitely not as easy as working like at the club. I pretty much sat opposite the S&C coach, so in our little office. So that's like such a really cool environment to be collaborative because you're only you're right next to them. Whereas in the private practice, I think most of the things for physios we're getting better at knowing about strength and conditioning, so you can talk the same language when you're talking to an S&C coach about where they're at in their rehab phase and what type of loading is going to be best for them, if it's more capacity work or strength work or power work or whatever it is. So but yeah, that's you got to do that via email or get on the phone and call them. But in general, what I found is that once you do that a few times, a lot of times the gym owners and the personal trainers and the S&C coaches love it because they know that you can, like in physio now, I think we're better at working around an injury rather than saying, no, you got to rest. We go, okay, no, you've got that sore knee, but you can smash up a body, you can smash your cross training and you can still work on your calf and all these other things. And it's a easy way to start to work together.
Fantastic, mate. Well, I won't hold you much longer. We've got one last question from someone that's watching, Kieran. Best preventions for shin splints. He's put in brackets.
Okay.
Stretching. It says stealing. I imagine that's strengthening. That's my guess. But what's your best preventions for shin splints?
Yeah, so I think with shin splints, you need probably the load is one of the big things. How quickly have you ramped up your loading? Making sure that it's a nice kind of clever progressions. You're not doing too hard too soon. I think some of the running surfaces that you're on are important. And then just making sure you've got enough capacity in your calf and through the front of the shin to cope with some of the loads that the foot's going to put it in, kind of tolerate. So maybe more on the strengthening side than the stretching, but stretching is going to help you as well. Good to have good mobility if you've got a stiff foot. And
for those that don't understand, understanding their loads and how to monitor their loads, what would be a simple way for someone to monitor, to progress their running loads over time?
So running loads, I guess, is your kind of the speed and volume of running that you're doing. So as a kind of a general rule, you wouldn't want to go too hard into really fast running if you haven't done a lot of fast running, and you wouldn't want to go into doing lots of big volumes of running, so lots of distance without having done a lot of distance beforehand. So as a general rule, you kind of use a bit of like a 20% rule to 10% rule, which is to not do big jumps of more than say 20% in your training volume for a few weeks, and also to progress the volume of running at one speed before progressing the speed. And that's the general heuristic. You can change it a little bit depending on the person and the case, but generally that kind of keeps you out of trouble.
Fantastic. Yeah. When in doubt, go a little bit slower in your progressions. Yeah. Awesome, mate. Well, thank you so much. We'll wrap it up with what are you most excited for 2021? What's on the horizon for Alex this year?
Yeah, well, one of the things over the kind of the journey working with Steve is we've always had this kind of call to come to Melbourne and do a bit of work over there. So we're actually going to be setting up a clinic together in Melbourne in Middle Park in the coming weeks.
Great spot.
Which should be exciting. So I'm excited to get over there and start helping some of the good people in Melbourne and checking out some of the athletes coming through.
So that will be like another Steve Saunders physio clinic, physiotherapy space. Yeah.
So we're going to do it together in Middle Park.
And that means you'll be moving to Melbourne, or how's that?
So I'm going to move into Melbourne. So I'm actually finishing up here with the Crows. So the grand final is my last match. Unfortunately, we didn't quite get the win.
Didn't get the points.
Nah, but that's sport. And then I'll be moving over to Melbourne in a week to start the clinic there.
Oh, fantastic, mate. Well, we'll have to catch up in the real flesh. That'll be good, mate. You're coming over to the Big Smoke.
Yeah, that's
Middle Park as well. That's a great suburb to be setting up a clinic. Yeah, no, I'll take you up on that. Yeah, for sure. Awesome, Alex. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences, your journey, what's worked, what your learnings you had along the way. I think whether you're developing physio, S&C, sports scientist, or footballer, you'll get a lot out of listening to this podcast. So if you missed the start or you've only just joined us late, make sure to head over to our IGTV and check it out, and we'll post it on our podcast in the coming weeks. So thanks for joining us, Alex. We'll see you very soon when you settle in. Thanks, mate. Been a pleasure, Jack. Awesome, Alex. Catch you, mate. All right. See ya. Thank you for listening. Make sure if you enjoyed this episode to join over 1,000 people by subscribing to our website. The link is in our bio, and you'll receive a free strength and conditioning program. If you want to work with one of our AFL strength and conditioning coaches, also click the link in our bio. You can check out our coaches there, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast. We're on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Thanks, everyone.